Hello everyone and welcome back to HTML and CSS lessons on Codecademy. So last time we talked about floating. Today we're going to be talking about positioning again, but in a different way. So let's just see. Great work so far. Yeah, great work. We are actually about 86 or maybe even more, maybe even 90% now through the course. So great work for coming this far, guys. Now that you understand positioning elements with float, let's move on to slightly more complex positioning methods. If you don't specify an element's positioning type, its default is set to static. This just means where the element would normally go. If you don't tell an element how to position itself, it just plunks itself down in the document. So, like here we can see that they're overlapping, and we probably do not want that to happen. Check out the divs in the editor. So I'm guessing here. They currently have static positioning, but we're about to change all that. Hit 7 submit code to continue. Let's just see what's happening. So we have a div outer and div inner defined there. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Let's just see what happens. So the position of the outer one is absolute. I'm guessing we're going to learn what that means. Start next lesson, please. There we go. Absolute positioning. Yes, here we go. The first type of positioning is absolute positioning. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry if I'm not. When an element is said to position absolute, it's then positioned in relation to the first parent element it has that doesn't have position static. If there's no such element, the element with position absolute gets positioned to relative to HTML. So the outer one is somehow relative to the HTML, so to the whole page, basically. To show you how this works, we've set the outer div to have an absolute positioning. So as we said before, position absolute. This means that when you position the inner div, so this one, or here this one, it will be relative to outer. So if outer had the default positioning of static, then inner would get positioned relative to the entire HTML document, like the outer one did. So if the outer one wasn't absolutely positioned, then the inner one would be absolutely positioned relative to the HTML. But now it's positioned relatively to the outer div, because the outer div is absolutely positioned. I hope that makes sense. So try it out. Set inner's position to absolute and give it a margin left of 20 pixels. Inner's position, okay, to absolute, and a margin left of 20 pixels. There we go. Submit, and we can move on. Relative positioning. So did you notice how the inner div moved 20 pixels from the edge of the outer div? Yes, we did. There's a space there. That's absolute positioning at work. So relative positioning though, so what we're talking about now, is more straightforward. It tells the element to move relative to where it would have landed if it just had the default static positioning. So if we were to remove this, which I am going to do now for the sake of the example, or no, not that one, I meant margin left, my mistake. So if we remove that, that is the static positioning. Relative is just comparing it, whatever you do with relative is going to move it depending on its position currently. So hopefully that explains that. Let's see what we need to do, or let's read out the next bit. If you give an element relative positioning and tell it to have a margin top of 10 pixels, it doesn't move down 10 pixels from any particular thing. It moves down 10 pixels from where it otherwise would have been. So where it would have been if its positioning was static. So if this was static and then you set its margin left, it would move to the right with a margin of left 20 pixels compared to what it would be when it was just static. let's show how this works by an example. So give it a try. Change inner's position to relative. There we go. And give it a margin left of 200 pixels. So if we do 0 pixels, it's going to be that. So that's its default, sort of, to call it position. But if we move it 200 pixels, it's going to move to the right, relative of the static. And it doesn't depend of the other div, of the outer div, in any way, because we've set it to relative and not to absolute. So let's move on. Fixed positioning. So I really hope that that actually makes sense, guys. If it doesn't, leave a comment. I will try to explain it once again, or just rewatch the segment over and over. It usually helps. So this positioning stuff's not so hard. Finally, fixed positioning anchors an element to the browser window. You can think of it as gluing the element to the screen. If you scroll up and down, the fixed element stays put, even as other elements scroll past. Oh, so that's how they do those things. That's interesting. I always wondered how that happens. Instructions. Set inner's position to fixed. Okay. Oh, why isn't my double click working in these videos? That's so weird. Fixed. Then scroll up and down a bit. It stays put even as outer moves out of the frame. Yeah, as you can see, that's there. Even though I'm scrolling up and down, it's still staying at the same place on my screen anyway. If I put it full screen, I can't really show it that well. Alright, I guess I can. So yeah, that's what happens if I do that. So let's save and submit code, and that was correct. So if you guys have any questions about this lesson, then do feel free to ask in the comments down below. But other than that, if you enjoyed this video, then please leave it a like, share and subscribe. If you didn't like it, leave me a dislike and tell me in the comments why you didn't like it, so that I can improve for next time. But until that next time, thank you guys so much for watching, and good